Hello, my name is Madison Rinkelberg,
I'm Carolina Herrera.
and this is the Coraddi podcast. We're starting a new leg of the podcast now since another semester started. Megan has moved on from the Coraddi, so now I have Carolina here with me.
Hello.
And you are a music student?
Yes, I'm a music performance major. I play flute.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. And you're a junior?
Yes,
right?
I'm a junior.
Nice. And I've said this before on the podcast, but I am a senior painting student. Woo! Graduating in 9 weeks. So today we both brought topics and events that are happening around campus or stuff like that. I can start off, or you can start off.
You go ahead first.
Okay. I was thinking about talking about the importance of having meaningful critique by friends and peers who know what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. You know, like, I mean, it's not a bad thing to get critique from somebody who's not an artist, because it's good to have like a fresh face or a fresh set of eyes from the public, but like having somebody that you can trust to give you meaningful and like deep critique in your work is so important, especially somebody who's not a professor, somebody who's like
you're more
comfortable around, and who knows your work maybe a little more personally than a new professor could.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who's like been there with you. In the senior studio, and for painting capstone, we have our own personal studio over on Highland Avenue. And like having space in there and having like all of my classmates there with me, such like a good thing to have like somebody walk up to you and just say like, oh, what are you doing with this? Like, oh, I don't know what that is.
Right.
We can have our own conversations about like what is meaningful in my work, what is meaningful in your work, like kind of bounce ideas off of you in something that isn't a formal critique in front of the whole class with the professor there.
Yeah, and your peers, they kind of live the same life as you.
Yeah.
Whereas professors, you know, they have their careers.
Mm-hmm.
They have done it all already, so they might say things like, well, you know, from my experience for doing this for 30 years, you know, but they're not in the circumstances that you are now. They're not living the same things you're living. They're not hanging out with you and like knowing you on a personal level.
Mm-hmm.
If someone who knows you might be able to be like, hey, I see what you're trying to do here. Like maybe try it like this, where a professor might not even understand what you're trying to do.
Exactly. And that's definitely not to say that professors won't give you meaningful critique, because that's really where that starts.
Mm-hmm.
But you're totally right. It's like a personal level. It's like professors will be thinking in their own mindsets. You know, they have their own personal studios. They're doing their own work. They're experiencing things on a different level. Like, they're artists out in the world doing their thing. Mm-hmm. It's what we're preparing to do, and hearing what they have to say is, you know, why we're here, obviously. But I think such an important thing about being an artist or a working artist is having people who are right beside you, like in experience and understanding.
Yeah, I completely agree. I can definitely also relate that in the music world. Sometimes your professors can either only tell you so much, or they have themselves only performed a specific piece in a certain context with a certain interpretation.
Yeah.
Or someone who you're like studying with now, who is growing with you in this process, they might say, oh, well, why don't you try this here? Which maybe sometimes, especially in the classical musical world, a lot of professors have a lot of roadblocks. It's like, this is how you're supposed to play this piece, because this is how everyone has played it before.
Right.
Even though it doesn't have to be like that. So someone who's younger, who's struggling now, might have a different perspective on a piece that could make it unique to a person than a professor who has, you know, played this piece a million times and they were told how to play it by their professor.
Right.
And not that their feedback isn't important.
No, definitely.
It's so important. You know, people choose schools to study with specific people. Mm-hmm. But professors only can speak from their experience and from their own lens.
Exactly.
And there's so many other
I'm so separated from the music world. Like, we're so far apart on campus, and I don't think I've ever really gone over there other than to paint outside in that pond.
Oh, it's so nice there.
Yeah, it's so cute. I love that. So, do you take any time to, like, is there any space over there to create your own things, or is it like learning from pieces that are already put together and like Do you do any of your own compositions, or is it just like...
I know that usually for most people, unless they do it in their free time, it's all you're learning excerpts for auditions.
Okay.
Because for auditions you will have to know how to play very specific things. Like,
Right.
I have a book that is just the same pieces that probably every other flutist sorry, in the world has that same book.
Really?
And we all learn how to play those pieces, and they're so specific. It takes years. Some of these pieces are like 30 seconds long.
Oh my god.
But it takes years to master them. So we take time learning that and learning like the repertoire, our canon. There are pieces for every instrument that are just so classic. We spend time learning those. But I know here at UNCG, a lot of professors are pushing for us to experiment with new music. So looking for composers who are not well known, who are not in the canon of the dead white men,
Right.
which is basically all the music
Oh,
we
I love
study.
that. Yeah.
Like women composers, people of color, people who are doing unusual instrumentations, interdisciplinary things. And that's on the rise, but it's still just essentially like, here's like a list of flute pieces, and we're gonna kind of go through them for these 4 years.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense, because you are here to like expand your own like skill and understanding. That whole thing. I just came from a 3-hour-long class.
No, it's okay. I didn't realize that I learned like last semester how long art student classes are.
Yeah, it's always a shock to like any other major, because like there are like long labs for like science majors, I guess, but like that's every single class is this.
Yeah, and it's kind of because I remember last semester someone came into one of my classes and was talking about the take a lunch break.
Oh yeah, I'm a part of that. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And I really thought, in my own little bubble, that because a lot of music majors don't have time to eat, and it's not that we necessarily have long classes, but it's like we have to go to theory, and then immediately after is history, and then we have this 2-hour practice break where we have to practice, and then we have ensemble, and then we have another class, and then we have to go to work. So it's kind of, even though time length is different, we're all kind of in the same boat.
No, definitely. I think that outside of the art building, it's not a question of like, oh, I have these long classes right after another. It's like the number of classes per day, and the number of responsibilities. And the Take a Lunch Break collective really goes beyond just like, oh, I have like official responsibilities like class or work, but it's like feeling also like I need to be doing other things, and I have all this time, and why don't I produce during that time?
Yep.
And it's like, it's stepping away from that and really thinking, I'm going to take time for self-care and to feed my body and keep myself going in a healthy way.
Yeah. We can't create our best art if we're not eating, if we're not sleeping.
Exactly. We
It
need
can't
to
get
be
better.
like, I'm sure you've heard of the stereotype of like the starving artist.
Yes.
And like working yourself to death. And that's just not what you need to be doing.
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. Like, you can like pump out, like, sure, at the beginning of that, you can pump out some good work, and you're obviously you're producing, and people are seeing that you're making a lot and taking the time. But like doing that as your only mode of production is just not good.
It's so unhealthy.
It's so unhealthy. You need to keep yourself going, because like you need a healthy mind to some extent to produce good work. Like healthy body, healthy mind is going to be, you're going to be at your keenest moment,
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. It's difficult out here with school. They don't make it easy for us.
They definitely don't.
It's I sometimes feel like, do these people forget what it was like to be in our position?
Yeah, definitely.
And some of them are not very old at all. So it's like, you were a student maybe 5-6 years ago. You don't remember the struggle. But I think a lot of professors now are becoming more aware of that.
Yeah, I feel like
pushing for that self-care.
Definitely. I feel like within the last few years, the university, like the administration of the university, has like tried to push towards that, like on a very official level.
Yeah.
And kind of like a surface level. Because, like,
Yeah.
like, I mean, how in-depth can they really go? Because, like, universities are set up in a way to, I guess, in a way, take you to your breaking point.
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
like, push you as far as you can go, like, and, like, shove as much as they can in 4 years.
Absolutely.
And it's just, like, sure, they can say, like, oh, we have resources on campus, and, like, take your time, and, like, you know, if you're sick, don't come to class. But then, like, you only have, like, 2 absences, or your grade goes down.
Grade goes down. There's deadlines.
There's deadlines that are non-negotiable.
Right.
In some exams, there are no makeups. Like,
exactly.
I mean, because they're like, oh, take care of yourself, but also get things done exactly how we need them to be.
Yep.
It's like a weird dynamic.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's like this here in the art building, but I know in the music building, it's a very friendly environment, but it's also very competitive.
I've heard that.
So it's like, oh man, if I don't take this 1 hour to practice to eat, like, I am not gonna, like, get this up to tempo, or this other person practices 4 hours and I'm only doing 2.5 because I took 1 hour to eat. Like, oh my gosh, you feel like you fall behind.
Do you feel like people would look down upon you, like other peers would look down upon you for not taking as much time as others? Or is that like...
I think at other places, it's definitely a more cutthroat, like, oh, well, I practiced 5 hours today. You only got 3. But here, people are, at least my peers, very understanding. We're all kind of in the same boat. No one, if someone is practicing a lot, it's because they're not going to class. And stuff like that, where we're all just kind of like, we feel like we don't have enough time to practice because we have to eat, but we're all out here making sacrifices. I mean, sometimes you skip a class because you're like, I'm recording tomorrow for this competition.
Yeah, and you need to practice.
And I need to practice. Or like, I can either, because I know personally for me, my busiest days are Tuesdays. And I only have about 2 hours to practice, which with all the stuff I have to practice is not enough to like really be that productive on anything.
Yeah.
And right now, this part of the spring semester for musicians is big competition season.
Oh, really?
It's, festival recording submissions. Everything is due.
Oh, shit.
And everything has different music you need to record for it.
Oh,
so you have all this music you're recording and trying to get ready, and you only have like 2 hours to do that, and you have to warm up, and there's...
Oh, yeah. Because you can't just, like, go at it.
You can't.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, you can, but after about, like, 2 weeks, you're like, oh, why isn't this aspect of my playing getting better? Oh, it's because I'm not doing my fundamentals.
Oh, jeez. That's so stressful. I mean, is that just because it's, like... Is it, like, festival season and concert season for the entire music world? Or is it just, like, within an academic standpoint?
For collegiates, and basically because a lot of festivals and competitions, they're open to anyone who plays the instrument, but most of the people who have, like, the resources and the time and the space to do recordings and stuff are people in institutions.
Okay.
And it usually runs from, like, the end of December to, like, the middle of March.
Oh. So, yeah, it is crunch time, isn't it?
It is crunch time. Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
It gets crazy. Very busy. A lot of music. But it's one of those things that I'm busy all the time, and I might not eat all the time, but I wouldn't trade it for anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, because I don't know if you feel the same way, but, like... Even though, like, I do sacrifice quite a bit for the work that I'm putting out, it's just so rewarding in some ways.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, because, like, for my capstone class, we need, on a baseline, 10 paintings done by the end of the semester, which doesn't seem like a lot, but each painting will take a good chunk of time, and you need to be in the studio, like, way longer, like, outside of class, because we only get we get 6 hours during the week, but a lot of the time it's like for actual critique, so you don't get a lot of studio, like, work time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Or, like, we'll be in this building doing, like, a whole lecture where my professor will be, like, showing us artists to give us inspiration and things to, like, take from. And so, like, most of the work that you need to be doing is outside of class, so it's, like, sucks all of your time. Like, usually my socialization is in there, Like, and it's a good thing that I have some friends in there, because if I didn't, oh geez. Like, and I mean, like, it's a lot looser because you can come in, like, whenever you want.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, I don't work well late at night or, like, early in the morning.
Right.
So it's, like, really just, like, my days that
Yeah.
I need to be in there. And there's only so much you can do because, like, you have to wait, to an extent, you have to wait for paint to dry before you can, like, because sometimes wet on wet doesn't work, and usually it doesn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I have to take time away from it for it to dry, and then come back to it, work for a couple hours, take away, like, step back. That's a lot.
Yeah, that's crazy. Mm-hmm. All the things that they require of us, but...
Did you want to go to your topic?
Yeah. What I wanted to talk a little about today, and kind of just get your perspective from, you know, this side of the visual and performing arts kind of field, is our responsibility as artists to engage in political action and or give platforms to minorities or people who are struggling.
Mm-hmm.
I know right now there's a big push in the music world for us to kind of get away from the traditional canon of music, which has traditionally been white men from Europe who are dead and have been dead for a long time. Yeah. And a lot of them were very sexist. Mm-hmm. A lot of them, there's this one composer, his name is Wagner. He was extremely anti-Semitic.
Oh, Jesus.
But his works are still performed all the time. And it's kind of like, well, his music, if you listen to it outside of thinking, oh, he hated people for their religion, it's beautiful. But to what extent do we have to balance, like, well, not only has his music been played for so many years now, he was also not a great person. Yeah. To what extent do we balance the beauty of the art he created with the terrible things that he thought and did?
Yeah, that's increasingly similar to what it is over here, because a lot of being a visual artist is taking inspiration and ideas from old artists, and like a huge thing is, like, you need to know your art history, and a lot of that art history is dead white men from Europe. Yeah. And there's definitely a push over here to step away from that. Like, it's exactly what you're saying. Like, yeah, we can look at their art and understand that formally they are doing something important, and they have put something out in the world that should be, like, paid attention to in a way. But also you need to think about, what's his name? I think it's, like, Paul Gauguin, something like that. But he did a lot of, like, figurative works, and I can't remember which country he went to, but he was, like, a white man. And in his works, he, like, objectified women of color, just, like, the worst. And it like, and I hope I'm getting his name right. I really don't think I am, though. But
dang it, Paul.
Honestly, if I don't get it right, whatever. He's dead. He's a white man. He's sucked. But, like, still, he's taught in classes because he created work that was seen as important at the time. Yeah. And, like, his name is, like, high up there for people that you should know about. But he was still this terrible dude. And there's, like, a bunch of artists like that, you know? And they're ones that we're taught about, like, in, like, the early years of art history. Later on, it gets more into, like, you definitely take classes that are more leaning towards people of color and minorities. Like, right now I'm taking art in the African American experience, and that's, like, a way better perspective on art, because it's just, I don't have to hear or, like, have my professor, like, uphold these men who I know are just the worst.
Literally the worst.
The worst.
Oh, and I think it's kind of ridiculous too that so many women and so many people of color did so many revolutionary things and were creating art at the same time as these white men, but their classes are like auxiliary classes. It's an elective.
Exactly. It's not a foundation.
Which it absolutely should be.
Definitely.
They were out there creating art. I mean, and there was a lot of people too, I'm sure, in the art world, like they were even stealing art or
100%
music from people of color, from women, from minorities, not giving them credit, and then being like, oh wow, look at this amazing thing that they pioneered. It's like, well, they've been doing it for years over here, but it's not a white country, or it was done by a woman.
I have a very specific example, and I need to look up her name, because if I get it wrong, it'll just be such an injustice.
Oh, actually, while you're looking for that, I'm just going to do a quick plug for something, an event we have going on in School of Music this Friday, 7:30 in the auditorium, is a wind ensemble concert.
Ooh.
It'll be really cool. Just come out and hear some music. A lot of men, but there's some women in there too. It's a good time. If you've never been to a School of Music concert, I would recommend it. It's free. It's in the auditorium. It's always a good time.
Is the auditorium that's like right here on Tate Street?
Yes, the big
cool.
one.
Nice.
It used to be called the ACOC Auditorium. For people who still know it as that, but it's over there. It's free.
It was what time on Friday?
7:30. I know it's kind of a strange time, but there's also other concerts coming up too. I just can't remember when. I know there's a jazz concert coming up, I think like the 27th, and that's at the Crown Carolina Theater. That one's ticketed, but it's always a lot of fun. Yeah,
that's awesome. Nice. I did find her name.
Back to this week's programming.
So, I don't know if you know the artist Andy Warhol.
Yes.
He did like the soup cans, stuff like that. Oh, I highly dislike this man, specifically because a lot of his work was directly stolen from a Japanese artist named Yaoi Kusama, and she was like, she's very popular for her polka dot works. And
oh wow,
yeah, during the height of Warhol's popularity, he stole a lot of her ideas, and it just like it tore her down to the point where I think she had to get like, I don't know if she was like hospitalized, or like she definitely had to get help with what she was going through because of him specifically, because he had just stolen work from her and ideas, and like he was getting all the credit because he was a white man.
Yeah, he's a white man.
White man, like seemingly doing something new, but it's been what she's been doing this whole time. Another like Jackson Pollock. Hate that man. God, don't make me look at
Pollock in this house.
He's always upheld as like, oh, he's doing like new shit, like never seen that before. He's like throwing shit on a canvas and calling it awesome, and he's like seen as like the bad boy in art, and I hate him. And his work is pretentious, and I really don't think it's that great, you know, like I just don't vibe with it at all. I didn't vibe with it before I knew what kind of a shitheel he was.
Yep.
But his wife was also an artist, and I can't remember her name at the moment.
See, look, there you go.
Exactly. Because I'm taught about Jackson Pollock and not his wife.
Not his wife. Oh my god.
Yeah, and he had a lot of like mental problems too. Like he was an addict and like all this, and he like her work and her life suffered because of him. But he was in the spotlight, and his work was seen as like top tier, like I don't know, just like.
Yeah, I know that there are so many composers that we study in it's called Western Music History. We're required to take 2 Western Music History classes. Only talks about men. Only talks about European men.
Yep.
And if you do even just a little bit of outside digging, so many of the composers we studied had wives that were making composers.
Yeah, exactly.
There's even this one guy. His name is Gustav Mahler. Very famous. His music is very good. I will give him credit.
Yeah.
But when he was marrying his wife, he told her, a condition of marrying me is that you have to stop composing.
Oh my fucking god.
And she was like, oh, okay. Because, you know, the position that women were in back, you know, in the early 1900s, late 1800s, you know, she was in love with him, and women had to a lot of times marry into social status. Her mom was like, don't you marry that man. But he did later realize what a mistake he had made. But that was years later. Yeah. All those years that she stopped
She could have been, like, growing and, like, thriving.
Exactly.
And he just took that away from her. Because he saw some competition.
Yeah, he was insecure. It's this whole just culture that has surrounded, that was present back in the day in the 1700s till now, that men are the composers. And it's just crazy.
Yeah. Like,
women were composing. And And another thing is that because we were so focused on men being the composers, especially in really early music, like in the Renaissance and stuff, we don't have a lot of records of women composers because no one was taking the time to write down their music or save their music.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, because I've never really thought about that, because I was about to bring up a female artist, like, during the Renaissance or post-Renaissance. And we do have record of her work because it's a physical thing. But music, someone has to choose to write it down and keep it.
Yeah.
And
it's so easy for manuscripts to be lost, thrown away, buried. It's on little pieces of paper.
Yeah, just like parchment. They could just get lost easily. That's crazy. Actually, I've never thought about that.
Yeah. And also, I guess maybe moving away from maybe into like a second part of issue is like, what responsibility do we have in creating our personal art for it to be political, if that makes sense?
Like, what is our responsibility to say something with our art?
Yeah. Do we have that responsibility?
Yeah.
Should that be on us? Or should we, if it's, let's say you were like super into like creating sculptures, but should you take the time to create a work that does comment on politics or society, or should you just kind of create your work and maybe leave it to someone else? Because I know, aren't there artists who their entire work is they create exclusively like political art?
Definitely.
Like in our own personal practices.
Yeah, like, do we have to be saying something?
Right.
Like, do we have, like, as new artists, is there something that needs to be said? Like, I've actually struggled with that a bit, because, like, in Capstone, it's like the whole thing is like finding your voice as an artist, and there's a big push to, like, well, at least I feel a big push to physically say something, like, bring something else to the conversation. And, like, I will say, like, the art world is shifting towards looking at people of color and queer artists and women artists, and which is great.
It is great.
But as a queer female artist, I feel this pressure of, like, having to be a part of that conversation.
Right.
Where, like, my personal interests lie somewhere else. Like, I've never felt like a need, or like, I've never felt like I have something else to say that another artist isn't already saying. And, like, sometimes people will critique my work and be like, well, does it mean like this? Or, like, are you trying to say this? Are you commenting on the world in this aspect? And I'm like, not really. I mean, I can't really stop people from interpreting my work in that way, because if they see that, I can't always be there to say, no, actually not.
Right.
You know, like, and that's kind of what artists have to live with. You know, like, people will interpret it how they will.
Yeah.
And you can't tell them no, unless you're, like, there facing them. You could say no. But yeah, I've never been one to put that out there. But there's definitely the feeling like, oh, should I be saying this? Should I be doing work that says this? Do you feel stuff like that, or is it like...
Sometimes, for sure. I know that when programming, like, my own, like, solo recitals and stuff, there's definitely the question of, you know, I really like this piece of music, but it was written by a man, and there are a lot of composers who are women, who are queer, who are people of color, who are making very relevant, like, political pieces, very relevant societal commentary. It's like, what is my responsibility as a performer to choose pieces like that to present to my audience.
Yeah.
And I struggle sometimes because not only are they hard to find, it's like there are also a lot of most of the pieces that I do know are in the canon.
Exactly.
And it's also like I know that there are a lot of people who are taking like a big charge, and we're only going to perform works by women. We're only going to perform works by queer people, by people of color. We're going to program these politically charged pieces that say things that bring issues to light. It's kind of like, especially as I'm not yet an established artist, like do I have a responsibility to establish that now?
Or will you in the future? Yeah. Like, is that even in your wheelhouse?
Right.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing to like battle with, because there's also a weight that comes with it. Like do I feel like I need to be doing this? Are there enough people around me that are doing it already? Like, do I have to be a part of that?
Right. And I also sometimes struggle with a lot of music will tell the stories of people who I don't know their experiences. I mean, I grew up middle class, I'm white. Like, to what aspect can I give their story justice? Yeah. Or is giving that a platform enough?
Yeah. Like, is it getting it out there, like, good enough? Or am I going to be able to represent what they're trying to put out there, too?
Right. Or should I create space for someone else
in that
spot, you know? Yeah. It's just, I don't know. It's something that I think about.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to juggle what my responsibility is, especially since there's no clean-cut answer. I mean, there are a lot of people who are making their careers with not engaging politically at all, and they're doing fine financially. They're creating art they love, but there are a lot of people who are also creating very relevant pieces, relevant art compositions. So it's just kind of like, where do I fit in?
Yeah, you kind of have to, like, I kind of see it as you're like some conduit to stuff, and you have to figure out like, what am I going to expand on? Right. Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah. All right.
Neat.
Another plug is I have two actually. If you haven't been over to the Weatherspoon Art Museum to see the To the Hoop exhibit that's up in, I think it's exhibit 7, I think. But it's upstairs. It's a really, really great exhibition, and it all has to do with contemporary art and its connection with basketball, which is like, it's like a weird connection, but like when I first heard it, I was like, okay, I guess. But then when I went through it, I was like, wow, there's like significant and important art being said about basketball. And I've never been a sporty person, so I was never I was always like, oh, I'm the art kid.
I am an art kid.
I'm the art kid. I can't do basketball.
I'm gonna break my arm.
Exactly. So it was never really a connection that I put, but like coming to UNCG, I have found that there is a lot of artists that connect sport and art. So it's a very, very interesting show. Also, we have some very prolific artists there, like Paul Pfeiffer. He has, I think, 2 works of his, and then another that I really like, Lorna Simpson. She's got like a really great piece in there. And then also in Winston-Salem at SICA, 2 of our painting professors, Miriam and Barbara, won like a really, really important, I think it's a grant. I don't know if it's a grant. Something. They won something that's like, it's like really important, and it's like crazy that 2 of our professors from here both got it in the same year. And they're showing their work at SICA right now. It's going to be up there for a couple months, so you have time to go see it. I highly recommend. They're 2 wonderful artists. All right, I think that's it. Thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you so much.
I am Madison Ringelberg, and this is
Carolina Herrera.
And we'll be back next week.
With more tea.
More tea.